Hello folks, and welcome to Jack Reviews Musicals. If this is your first time seeing my face on the internet, my name is Jack and I'm a musical theater superfan based in St. Louis, Missouri. This is my YouTube channel where I share my thoughts on all of the musical productions I go to see in the area. And the very kind people at Stray Dog Theater have invited me to attend their final dress rehearsal for their production of The Second Hurricane, which is currently playing right now at Tower Grove Abbey until August 30th of 2025. Stray Dog Theater is taking a huge gamble with The Second Hurricane. It's a rarely produced opera, making this the first time that Stray Dog has produced an opera, composed in the 1930s, making this possibly the oldest piece of musical theater Stray Dog has done, made to be performed in high schools, meaning that it's primarily an educational show. So the decision for Stray Dog to put on this production was kind of a head-scratcher, but then the show's curtain speech by the show's director, Gary F. Bell, enlightened the audience a little bit. The Second Hurricane was created in 1937 by classical composer Aaron Copland, with a libretto by poet and dance critic Edwin Denby. It was commissioned by the Henry Street Settlement Arts Center in Manhattan's Lower East Side, which gives arts instruction and performance opportunities for low-income New Yorkers of all ages. In 1937, New York City was being hit hard by the Great Depression, so Aaron Copland's aim with this commission was to create a piece of theater where the focus would be on young people learning to take charge during a time of crisis. The Second Hurricane was written in 2 acts and runs at around an hour to 90 minutes. And that original Henry Street Settlement production featured a mostly student cast that was directed by a very young Orson Welles, featuring a special appearance by a very young Joseph Cotten in one of the adult roles. It was this collaboration between Welles and Cotten that would lead to the film Citizen Kane. Fast forward to 1985. The founder and artistic director of Stray Dog Theater, Gary F. Bell, was a 21-year-old working actor in New York City, and he was cast in the Henry Street Settlement's revival of The Second Hurricane that was put on to celebrate Aaron Copland's 85th birthday, in a production directed by then up-and-coming opera director Tazewell Thompson, who would soon thereafter be internationally recognized for his contributions to the medium of staging opera. Copland would die 5 years later in 1990 at the age of 90 after a long battle with Alzheimer's. This year marks the 125th anniversary of Aaron Copland's birth. So Gary F. Bell decided to honor Copland's legacy by presenting The Second Hurricane in what is quite possibly the first ever professional level production of the show. The Second Hurricane takes place in the time that it was written, placing us squarely in a small Midwest town ravaged by a hurricane, raining destruction on the town, flooding over the whole region. Our main characters are 6 high school students who have been recruited to send resources, supplies, and relief to victims of the flood. But along the way, the plane that they're riding in on has to make an emergency landing on an island that was created by the floodwaters. A bit of high ground that sits between 2 willow trees, hence they call it Two Willow Hill. The supplies get dropped off and the pilot flies the plane somewhere where they can get help, but along the way, the plane blows up and crashes. So now the kids are stranded, and soon a second hurricane starts to blow through, leaving the kids exposed to the elements. So the rest of the show is the 6 of them learning to cooperate and trying to survive this situation, while in turn the adults in the town coordinate to try and rescue them. The Second Hurricane works for essentially the same reason Come From Away works. It centers around a disparate group of people discovering the importance of empathy and resilience and building a sense of community during an emergency. But The Second Hurricane does this through a lens that I think kids will be able to understand pretty well. All of the kid characters have relatable aspects of childhood that we remember, especially the attitudes of kids going through trying times. Even the adults in the show are written entirely from the point of view of a child, overly concerned for safety but nonchalant in regards to independence. at least at the start. The plot is also structured in such a way that it always leaves you guessing. Act 1 ends with the kids failing to work together and going their separate ways, so when Act 2 starts, you're kind of on the edge of your seat. The second hurricane is very accessible for kids who are in that middle and high school age range. I can really see the second hurricane being someone's gateway into opera. Even though the score is classical music, the melodies feel very modern. And even though it's set in the 1930s, the lyrics don't really have any period anachronisms outside of the use of antiquated technology like biplanes and telegraph radios. Other than that, it's very timeless. You could have the second hurricane set in the modern era with the same material and it wouldn't feel jarring. But director Gary F. Bell chose to retain the 1930s setting, which I think is a wise decision because the historical context of the show is actually very important to understanding the full breadth of this piece. The second hurricane was written during a national emergency, and in making the setting that specific, it lets the kids watching the show see that same urgency and desperation in the emergencies that we are going through in the world now. And Bell directs the entire cast of both kids and adults to feel that urgency constantly. The blocking and choreography is very tight, a lot of it even extending out into the audience space at Tower Grove Abbey, including a pretty clever use of an overlook window from an upper level of the actual Abbey building itself. And for the most part, the actors' voices are forceful and intentional. But there were still some cast members who, at the final dress rehearsal that I saw, still struggled with their intention and objective a bit, though their sense of desperation was communicated pretty well across them. Soren Carroll as Butch, the school bully, emphasizes the character's moodiness a bit too much, coming off more as a sad sack than a brute. Ben Hammock as Jip, who emerges as the group's leader, is earnest to the point of being broad, but that is what would happen when a kid is forced to become a leader in a situation like this, so I can't be that hard on him. Wesley Balsamo as Fat, Chip's brother and the group's muscle, is a character who a lot of the time is in need of comfort, and Balsamo gives Fat a forlornness that is rather one note. But he does sell the crying that he does in Fat's song when he sings about how he has been left all alone to endure the second hurricane. C.C. Moore plays a little country boy named Jeff who was abandoned by his parents during the first flood. And Moore sells Jeff's pluckiness well enough, but makes him a tad too precious. Jeff does come off as a little boy caricature sometimes. But what actually made me care for the whole ensemble taken together were the performances from the rest of the group. Jabari Boykin gives Lowry, the tech wizard, a layered performance of a nerd filled with determination who is tougher than he looks. Bryn Sentnor was great as Gwen. She's the firecracker who's small in stature but is explosive when the going gets tough, and Sentnor takes full advantage of that. But the standout of the night was Stray Dog veteran performer Nadia Kapitanovich as Queenie. She's an aspiring nurse who delivers the best aria in the whole show, Queenie's Song, about how it has taken the second hurricane for Queenie to realize just how wonderful everything is. Her soprano was uplifting. She was the antidote to all the doom and gloom that the audience has been experiencing up until that point. And that itself is actually a credit to Aaron Copland's composition. Almost all of the songs in the show end on a tension point that leads into the next scene, causing those songs to end without applause. It keeps you on edge pretty much the entire time, which is brilliant. But Queenie's Song was the only one that ended with that sense of euphoria, that allowed the audience to applaud. It gives you that glimmer of hope that you need to get through to the end of this story, thinking that, yeah, these kids might actually make it out of this okay. For Stray Dogs production, the material's 30-piece orchestration had to be reduced to only 12. But musical director John Gerdes actually transposed the score rather intelligently, conducting it from Tower Grove Abbey's first row in such a way that this 12-piece orchestra feel like a full 30. Gerdes makes this mid-size orchestra successfully run the music's emotional gamut, from haunting and foreboding to beautiful and even soaring. So real quick, I am going to rattle off the members of the orchestra as listed in the program here. We have Helen Bandara on bassoon, we have Mo Carr and G. Schmeideke on the violins, Andrea Clark on the flute, Chris Dressler and Larry Levin alternating on the trumpet on select performances, Jill Hamill on viola, Bill Howells on trombone, Michaela Cuba on the bass, Emily Mihai on the clarinet, Paul Rushoff on the cello, Brandon Lee Thompson on the oboe, and Deborah Thuid on percussion. The choral work from the entire cast was great. Stray Dog uses a cast of 24 total actors, most of whom had musical theater experience, so they had to be trained by John Gerdes to pull off the score's legit opera sound. And they did an amazing job at that, particularly the adult ensemble. Brittany Cole has a lot of fun as Mrs. Lester, the befuddled school principal who sends the kids out on the relief effort. Jan Niehoff is appropriately cocky as the pilot, Ms. McClanahan, the role that was actually originated by Joseph Cotton in that 1937 production. Gansner, as the school's radio operator, plays very well the tension of having to spread the news of the second hurricane. From the chorus, Madeline Black, Chris Moore, and Terrell Thompson have fine vocal turns as various concerned parents. Real quick, I'm also going to rattle off the rest of the cast members because they deserve a shout out too. We have Eliana and Leah Bryson, Margot Carroll, Jacob Cowley, Abby Donald, Sydney Fendler, Sierra Hale, Rebecca Hadelid, Ava Hettenhausen, Lizzie Clem, and Jess McCauley. If there was another problem that I had with this production, it would be actually how the choir is arranged on stage. The kids and the adults were separated into clusters that are on either side of the stage, and depending on where you're sitting, you do lose individual members of the chorus, and I really wanted to be able to see all of them throughout. So I think it would have been better to have them arranged spread out a bit more, maybe even closer to upstage center. Director Gary F. Bell also designed the props and the set, featuring elevated platforms for the orchestra and the choir, decorated with textured layered fabrics that evoke images of flowing floodwaters and raging winds as well. Bell collaborated with musical director John Gerdes, stage manager Jude Hagin, and associate director Justin Bean to design the show's soundscape. All the way through the show's intermission, it simulated the second hurricane blowing through, culminating in a rising action at the beginning of Act 2 that reverberates through Tower Grove Abbey. They created a brilliantly immersive atmosphere purely through sound. Tyler Denow keeps the lights bright during the indoor scenes, as well as having a special spot for John Gerdes as the conductor. And the island lighting is very natural and evocative, with brilliant uses of cool colors to make the island alternate between dangerous and comforting. The costumes by Colleen Mickelson and Sarah Jean Dowling are period appropriate and quite diverse in the outfits themselves, containing possibly every clothing combination that you could think of from 1930s fashion, even including the use of patchwork on Jeff's costume. In conclusion, the second hurricane is a very different show from any other that I have reviewed from Stray Dog. For them to present an obscure youth opera from the 1930s that I didn't even know existed before they announced they were going to do it was a huge risk. They had to know this was not going to be a guaranteed success. But I think that is exactly the reason why you should see this show, because it's a huge risk that is not a guaranteed success. Some of the best musical theater that you can see is a show where you have nothing from your previous viewing experiences to connect it to. It's all entirely new. And for Stray Dog Theater to take such a different turn for their musical programming, choosing a show that is so old-fashioned and yet so timeless, pulling all of their resources together and putting in genuine effort to make it the essential piece of musical theater that era Aaron Copland intended it to be. That is what makes this production of The Second Hurricane a game changer for Stray Dog Theater. It's a revolutionary production, and I think it's going to lead to even more artistic experiments from Stray Dog Theater in the future, and I am very much looking forward to seeing them. Have you seen Stray Dog Theater's production of The Second Hurricane? If so, what did you think about it? Whatever it is, whatever you think, comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any more St. Louis musical theater reviews coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, long live the musical!